Hello, and welcome to the Space for Humanity sponsored Universal Inclusion podcast. In this initial series, we're amplifying voices of diversity in the space industry, listening to the many paths there are to take, and learn lessons of how to overcome both professional and personal barriers. Hi, I'm your host, Aisha, and I'm the founder and CEO of Universal Inclusion, as well as the Director of Programs at Space for Humanity. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Khristian Jones to explore creating opportunities for minorities in the space industry. Khristian is an interiors engineer at United Airlines, managing the Boeing 737 fleet, and is a previous material test engineer at Virgin Galactic. Khristian's passion came from her university studies, but also showing young people that they can achieve and thrive in a career in STEM. Through this passion, Khristian co-founded and became an executive member of the Patti Smith Fellowship. This fellowship aims to provide a meaningful, effective pathway into successful aerospace careers and future aerospace leadership to people whose race and ethnicity has made them the subject of systemic bias. Through her nonprofit work, she continues to inspire young STEM professionals and advocates for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the aerospace industry. Welcome, Khristian.
Thank you so much.
It's wonderful to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. I was looking forward to it.
Oh, I know. Our last conversation was such a rich one, so I'm so excited to dig even deeper into this area.
This is some of my favorite things to talk about. So I look forward to getting to kind of dig in a little more and see where we go.
Perfect. Well, let's start off with the Patti Smith Fellowship. Can you tell me a little bit, for those of us who don't know about it, can you give a little bit of an intro about what it's about?
Absolutely. So the Patti Smith Fellowship is for African American and Black students in the aerospace industry. Originally, it was created for students that were in their freshman, sophomore year looking for their first internship in aerospace. And then it kind of has evolved over the last few years to open up to both freshman, sophomore, and upperclassmen, our juniors and seniors that may have had another internship in it before, but not necessarily in the aerospace industry. And so really it's just rich space for networking and mentorship. Our students get 2 mentors, 1 peer mentor that has been through the program already, just to give kind of tips and tricks of how to make the best of their internship, and then an executive mentor that has been out in the industry. Some have been in the industry for years. Some, they're more so, getting into their mid-career as managers and things like that. And so it really just kind of gives the student a broad range of mentorship of something from as short term as the mentorship for this summer, as well as, hey, I want to be the NASA administrator one day. How do I do that? And so our students are gifted with that. And then as well as a cash grant to kind of help out with anything school related, anything that's going to help kind of relieve the stress as far as internships, because we see a lot with the disparities within racial equity is the issue of, okay, well, I don't have the money to get to the internship, or I don't have the money to pay for, school or whatnot. And so it's really helpful for them to get that assistance and not have to worry about that. And they can just focus on being rock stars at their internship. And the biggest piece of it all is this awesome internship at one of the top aerospace companies in the country. We have Ball Aerospace, SpaceX, Blue Origin, just to name a few. That our students intern at and have been rocking the house ever since 2021. So it's really exciting to see them grow and continue to get opportunities after the fellowship. But also want to pay homage to where we started and kind of how we got our sea legs. The Brooke Owens Fellowship was created in the name of Brooke Owens. She was an aerospace professional and she passed. And so some of her friends got together, Will Pomerantz, Cassie Lee, and Lori Garver, the Lori Garver, got together and created a fellowship in her honor. And so we wanted to honor Patti Smith for her trailblazing. And for those who don't know, Patti Smith was the first director of the Commercial Space Department of the FAA. And she literally there would be no commercial space without her. She was brought, the minds of, Richard Branson and Elon Musk to government, who said, you're crazy if you think you're going to do this. And so brought those two sets of people together to create what we now know as the commercial space industry. And so we really wanted to pay homage to her, as well as kind of pass that torch, that virtual torch that she's passed, unfortunately. And she's not with us anymore, but it's that symbol of continuing to pass the torch, and them, continuing to trailblaze. So
Oh, thank you for giving us that insight. At Space for Humanity, we've got our Citizen Astronaut program. And I'm fortunate to read so many of the applicants, their bios and, their pitch about why me. And we have so many fellows. And what I notice about them, the through line, is that they know why they want to go to space. They have a very, very clear mission, personal mission. And is that something that you help people develop through the fellowship, would you say?
absolutely. I think there's a broad range of some students that said, I came out the womb wanting to be an astronaut, and I knew this is what I wanted to do. And then you have some students that said, I kind of was interested in it, but I wasn't sure. So I feel like, this is kind of, I'm just trying to check it out and see if it's the space for me. And then and you have some students that said, I've always been interested, but I never thought I could do it. And so I kind of wrote it off in my mind. And so it's really seeing even the students that have said, I came out the womb wanting to be an astronaut. I know I was one of those students. I'm not in the program, but I can definitely empathize with of, okay, I thought there was this, this is the path to become an astronaut. And then you get there and you're like, okay, nobody tells you like the nitty gritty details about becoming an astronaut or being an aerospace engineer or working propulsion at an aerospace company. Like, no one really talks about the nitty gritty details, good and bad. And so I think the program really does give the opportunity to explore in a less pressure environment, in the way of, a lot of our host companies are understanding that our students are really exploring, and they're rock stars, and a lot of them are diamonds in the rough that just didn't have the opportunity or exposure, but had a love and a passion for their community as well as the aerospace industry. And that's something so I have to take a second to say our students are absolutely phenomenal people all around. They really care about, the people to their left and to their right, and really making a difference, as well as, the bigger macro things of space debris, and we don't want stuff crashing into each other kind of thing. And then the other is diversity, equity, and inclusion in the aerospace industry, and making it more inclusive for all people. And so that's the really cool part, getting to see students grow in not just their professional aspirations, but also their personal aspirations and how they want to impact the world and leave their lasting impact.
Well, it really shows. It really shows. So, kudos to you. Now, talking about becoming a fellow, what's the process like?
Oh, the process
How does someone
is
apply the question?
absolutely. So pretty much the main thing for the application, is it's a few essay prompts. We have some multimedia essays that we require of our students to submit, as well as the standard transcripts, letters of recommendation. And then they go through a pretty tough screening process. So we go through our first round of looking at applications. We have two folks from our team, our selection team, that will review. And then that's how we get our semifinalists. And if you make it through the semifinalist round, then you go through an actual virtual interview. We do virtual video interviews to just get to meet the student. And it's, for me, I suggested it just because sometimes seeing someone's face is better than just being on the phone and getting to see their expressions and things. And so that's why we continue to do video interviews. And then once that happens, you become a finalist, and then you get paired with a host company. And as co-founders, slash executive team of the Patti Gray Smith Fellowship, my team comes together, and we kind of do like a Cupid of matchmaking as far as companies go with students. And then if all goes well with all of those things, those students get paired with the host companies, and the host companies will get paired with the students. And it's like I said, that matchmaking, and then you become a fellow. And so that's kind of where the process, in a way, it ends but starts at the same time, because that's just the beginning of the experience in the fellowship, and getting to network with your cohort and with the other fellows in the program, the alumni of the program, getting into your internship. But it's about a 4-ish month process. We usually start in September with getting applications. And then usually around Christmas time and holiday season, we're announcing to our students, or calling rather to our students, and letting them know that they made it into the program, which is one of my favorite parts of the program, getting to hear their reactions. And a lot of them, it's life changing, and I know for me with the Brooke Owens Fellowship, it's a fairly similar process for sure as far as the rounds. And I know for a fact it was life changing for me, because I felt like someone saw my light, and someone saw, my potential and what it is that I could do. And that was life changing for me. And it really did change my trajectory to be where it is now. So that's my favorite part of getting to relive it every year emotionally, and get to live it with the students when they're like screaming or speechless, or not wanting to say anything, or super calm. Like you can tell they want to scream a little bit, but they don't want to be embarrassed. So
I completely understand. I'm so fortunate that I'm usually the one that breaks the news of you are going to space. So the people who are selected for the Citizen Astronaut program. And yeah, I just light up thinking about it, because telling someone, hey, your dream is coming true, and this thing you've tried really, really hard to get to, like, I'm giving you the good news, you got it. There's nothing like it.
nothing like it. And it's the best. And I love doing it during the holidays, because it's the best gift. And it's a gift that keeps on giving. It's, at least to me, to get to see, and selfishly to get to see their reaction of, getting to see them from applying on paper to, seeing them in person during the summit, and getting to know them over the years. And with some of my fellows, getting to see them grow even post fellowship. It's so rewarding. And it also keeps me sometimes even going when I'm like, I don't even think I can do this at this point. And getting to talk with those students, and kind of get reassurance that there is an impact being made. It makes all the difference. And so I'm so privileged to be able to lead this cohort, and be on the leadership team. It really does make a difference in my life for sure.
And how many people apply? And then how many fellows do you have in a year?
Roughly about between 100 and 120 apply every year. And then when it is all said and done, usually between 28 and 35 usually
Okay.
become fellows. It just depends on how many host companies and how many fellows each company wants to take. That kind of determines what the size of the class will be. But it is a significant cut down as far as how many people do apply and how many people actually become fellows, which is I think it's great, because as far as healthy competition, blind competition, not knowing who you're competing against,
Mm.
but we get the best of the best. And so it is a tough process, but even the students that don't necessarily make it into the fellowship are still, coming down the pike and having internships at the same host companies, that they ended up not necessarily making it in this year, or past years, but they're interning now and doing fantastic. So it's really cool to see even the students that aren't necessarily selected for the program, but still thriving throughout with being in the process, and growing from the process.
I can also we've got some through lines here, because I feel the same way about the folks that, we only have one seat at a time right now. to be chosen for the Citizen Astronaut Program. And I really think of the folks that don't get chosen as a pool of aligned candidates. And this pool, everyone's so different, but everyone's so amazing. And it's really hard when you break, also the flip of the coin, breaking the bad news that someone wasn't chosen as well. But it's hard to, in that moment, tell them like, no, you've got something special. You've made it this far, even just to apply. We're looking at leadership, community development, and impact. And if you're saying like, put your hand up for anything in that realm, like, I'm amazed and I want you to keep going.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the hard part is seeing the students that, you have that spark with, that you're like, this kid's got it. It's just, we got to figure out, where to place them, or, and sometimes it's just based off of the year. And unfortunately, we only have so many spots. And so that's the hard part. But I love getting to see students that take that feedback, they get more experience, whether it be research or taking another class or something like that, and apply the next year, and getting to see just their drive and resilience. It really does make a difference, and because that builds character over time. You're going to get no. Most likely, especially if you're doing something that not everybody wants to do, you're gonna get no. There's only so many spots, and if that's something you really want, you got to keep going. And so it's so great to see students who have applied multiple years, and then getting to see them become fellows and rock their internships and beyond. It's amazing to see. And whenever I have to have those conversations, or Khristian, I didn't get in, but what can I do? I always encourage them that this is just, it may not be right now. And if I can tell a personal story really quickly, the Brooke Owens Fellowship, when I first applied, I was a finalist, and I got matched with 4 different companies, and only one reached out to me, and I was so excited, and I thought I was getting hired, and they were like, "Oh, this is starting the pay, and what you'll be doing and all of this." And then I heard nothing. And so I felt kind of what the kids say now, ghosted. And I was so sad because I really wanted that internship at that specific company. And I ended up getting an internship with Mojave Air and Spaceport. And it really did make a difference in my life as far as understanding commercial space, and understanding you don't necessarily have to be a NASA astronaut to be an astronaut. But all things happen in due time, because the next year I was on the train, going home for, I think, maybe spring break or fall break or something. And I get an email from the company saying, "Hey, like, we really want you to be in our internship program. Can you interview like in the next couple days?" Wow. And I ended up getting the internship. And if I remember correctly, I think the interview was like maybe 10-15 minutes. And it was just kind of like, we just want to triple check and make sure you're clear. But I say that story because, I could have gave up at that time, and just said, "Hey, maybe I'm not cut out for it." But things do come full circle. And so I love getting to witness the full circle moments for students, when it's just not the right time. And, I always say delay does not mean denial when it comes to anything in life, especially with work. It just may not be the right time. And I'm so glad in my personal story that the timing was what it was, because I learned so much about myself in that short year, of being an intern with Mojave Air and Spaceport, and then going over to Virgin Galactic. So that was a big deal for me, and a big growing moment.
Well, you just never know where your path is going to go. I think the more that I try and design my path, the more I'm humbled that I can't. Like, the opportunities that have come and the blessings that I've had, I wouldn't have imagined. But at the same time, I've got my eyes really wide open in that, I am really conscious of the opportunities that are there, and making sure that I'm ready when a door opens, or, the peeking through of a door, a little light coming through, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready, I'm here. Um,
Absolutely.
so for folks that are applying, do you have any tips? Anything that you think, you know what, this is a real push in the right direction for an applicant?
I would say my biggest tip is if you feel led to apply, even an inkling in you, do it. Because I
Mm.
know a lot of students will say, I'm not sure. I see a lot of fellows, they're so accomplished and they have so many awards and this and that, and they get imposter syndrome. And so I always explain to them that it's not about the accomplishment. Everybody has a start somewhere. And at the end of it all, everyone doesn't have the same path. And I know for a fact I felt that way when I applied to the Brooke Owens Fellowship. I only applied because I call her my school mom, my guidance counselor, or my not mentor. I'm sorry, she became my mentor, but she was my counselor in college, and she would sign me up for my classes and things like that. And she said, "Hey, there's this program. I think you'll be great for it, and you should sign up." And I gave her a million and one reasons why I wouldn't make it, and it was too much. And then she said, "Well, I think you should apply." And when she says that twice, that means that I'm gonna apply. So it's that push. Sometimes you need that push of someone that believes in you, but also for students themselves, everybody doesn't have that person in their life that's gonna, push them and you say, okay. And so I always say, if there's even an inkling, the worst thing that could happen is a no. And you take that experience, interview experience, getting to network. And because of the interviews, we see now students are on our radar. Even if they're not in the fellowship that year, we remember everyone that's a repeat applier or someone who's announced at a company for an internship class. I know for a fact, I'm like, hey, I know that person. And so definitely my biggest tip is if you have even an inkling of this is something I'm interested in and this is something that I feel like I could really grow from, apply regardless of the competition. Period.
Absolutely. Everyone that we've selected for the Citizen Astronaut program had that same, like, are you sure it's me? Are you sure? And had hesitation before applying. And so you really don't know, and you just have to go for it. When it comes to we've got nearly 3,000 applicants for our program, and people are always trying to gamify it, always trying to be like, okay, what's the formula, Aisha? How do I exactly do it? And there is no formula, but I would say that there is this ability to be genuine in the leadership, community development, and impact that they might be doing. And we can really tell who's doing something for the resume
Mhm.
and for the application, and who's developing something because they're like, I believe in this community development or impact project. I know that this is really aligned with me, and I know that I'm making a difference in the world. Like that just really, it really shows. And so I always tell people, you don't have to do a million things, but the things you're doing, make sure you have your heart really involved in it.
Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I always tell my students, if it's something that you're passionate in and you love, anything that comes with fame or fortune or anything like that or recognition comes with that. Everything that I have done that I've somehow got recognition for, I wasn't seeking that recognition. It was just I see a need, I have a solution, and I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
And that really makes all the difference. And so when you fail, you don't feel like a failure. It's just, okay, how do I go back to the drawing board and figure some things out? So that's very, very important, and the calculation of just, oh, I want to put this on my resume. I've found that in a lot of programs there are students, and even in my experience in the past, students that were just like, this is just prestigious and I want something else to be, on my resume. And then you have other students that are like, this is life changing. And I just really did this because I'm following my heart. And, you never know. where it's going to go, but I find that those are the students that go the farthest, is the ones that they really are just, doing what it is that they love and making an impact because they want to.
Yeah.
And folks see that and see that shine and see that light and that passion in them. And that's awesome to see. It really is.
And now, you know what? It's okay to start with needing to get a scholarship. And so you put something down. And it's okay
Absolutely.
to follow someone else's road. But just know that if you can take the time to reflect and then make it authentic, it's going to pay off. It's going to pay off in the long run. Not just that you're going to really enjoy what you're doing and feel that reward, but people like you and me on the other side of these programs, like we can read it, we can see what's genuine and what's not.
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. And not to say on the other end of the spectrum, I get it. It's what I like to call a hustle. You know what I mean? You have to continue to compete. You have to continue to grow. And because our fellowship is really aimed toward a disenfranchised community in the aerospace industry, a lot of times it's, just trying to figure things out for the first time. And a lot of times it's with no help because you just don't have it. And I had very, very supportive parents and have very supportive parents, but they had no clue what they were doing when it came to aerospace. They were just like, good job, honey, doing great. And really had no clue what the steps were, what classes I need to take, who I needed to, be mentored by and network with. And like I said, I was very fortunate to have supportive parents and that were college educated and able to kind of, at least even in the college space, kind of get an understanding of what that looks like, but adding that extra layer of being a first generation engineer. And not kind of knowing. So, and I was very fortunate. So it's hard when you don't have any of that. Some of our students are first generation, period, and they're like, I want to be an aerospace engineer, and we're like, yay! So now what?
Yeah, it's a yes. And let me give you some information. Let me get you a mentorship. Let me make sure you don't make the mistakes that I made.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So when it comes to the opportunities, because the issue is there's so few. Let's dive into, DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. What does that mean to you?
That is a very great question. I also like to add belonging on there because it's so interesting because diversity, equity, and inclusion, accessibility, and belonging, and now I'll throw justice in there as well. It's one of those very, 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 and I'll say diverse for lack of better terms, but they're similar, but yet they all have their own individual needs.
Mhm.
And I think as a overall society, we're pretty good right now about you're different than me. And I think the biggest thing, especially with diversity, is that what I've found is that there's a status quo of, okay, the majority is the standard and everybody else is different. And I think that's what kind of takes away from diversity in its entirety because the textbook definition of diversity is you're different than me. There is no status quo.
Mhm.
And so it allows folks to feel like everybody is included, and I think I've had, experiences in the past where I've been at different conferences or, a DEI booth. And I was in college one time and a student came up, a white student had came up to me, white male, and he said, oh, well, I mean, I'm white. So do I like not get to be in the diversity, equity, and inclusion office? And I shared with him, no, like that's diversity in itself. Like you're also welcome. It's not a exclusive club for
Mhm.
anybody, even though, yes, we know that if there's a minority, it's a little bit harder for inclusion and feeling like you have a place to call home. But it also is not a status quo. Everyone is a part of diversity and everyone has a part to play. So I think it really is a call, like diversity is a call to action in itself of no one's exempt, regardless of age, gender, race, ability or not. I think that that's really important. And as far as equity, what it means to me specifically is is I think there's a misconception of equality and equity. And equality is everybody gets the same thing, right? And equity is when you dig a little bit deeper of somebody that, for example, I love using this example of we're living in a right-handed world. Right-handed people are like, my scissors work, my pen's good, I don't get ink on my hand when I'm writing, and to see, someone from a perspective of a left-handed person is saying, okay, well, now I have to work twice as hard just to be in the same space and have the same opportunities as someone that is right-handed. And so I think that's something that's so important. There may be different things that are needed for someone that is left-handed, such as left-handed scissors. I have a friend that's left-handed, and I kid you not, the first time she saw a left-handed scissors, she was like, "Oh, left-handed scissors," and most people are like, "Okay, it's scissors, calm down." But when you feel, and that kind of bridges the gap also too with inclusion of feeling like you're seen as well as belonging, feeling like you're actually seen and what your needs are being met, regardless of if it's the majority or not. Um, and so I think that's really important with equity is you're meeting people where they are so that at the end of it all, everyone is equal,
Exactly.
if that makes sense.
Okay.
And inclusion, that's so important. I think inclusion in a way is one of the most difficult because it's not as mathematical, right? Diversity, you can say this percentage and this percentage and this percentage, and with equity you can say, oh well, this opportunity and this many things and this percentage. But with inclusion, it's a feeling. And same thing with belonging. It's a feeling that you get from the inside coming out. And so I think that's one of the hardest two in all of it because it really is hard from an outside looking in. You have to be very in tune. And that kind of adds, I know in our past conversation, we talked about EQ and having empathy. There's some level of empathy you have to be able to be inclusive because sometimes we're in our own heads and we only see things, our way. Again, kind of going with the right-handed person. If somebody we can walk through our rest of our life not caring about someone who's left-handed because we never have to deal with it. But when you have that EQ of like, okay, I may be right-handed, but I also am hearing impaired, you have that empathy of, okay, I can kind of see where this person is coming from and may need a little extra help or may need the left-handed scissors or sinks that are for left-handed people or, doorknobs that are for left-handed people and things like that. And so that's so important to have that EQ piece. And I think that's something that it may not necessarily be in the acronym of DEIA, J, B. Yeah. I totally botched that. But I think that it's definitely a subset of that and really understanding each other and really getting an understanding of we all have our differences, we all have our needs, but each one of those things are important. No one's need is any, better or worse than the other or more necessary than the other. It's we all have our needs. And that's really, really important. So I'll say long story long, as my mom would say, that's kind of what it all means to me. And I think it's to make it more of a pictorial idea. I think of it kind of DEI as a dinner table. And you see the look around, you're invited. Okay, I'm invited in. All right, I sit down. And now, okay, here I get, some bread and butter. And now I'm just kind of eating on the bread and butter, and everybody else has steak and potatoes and asparagus and wine, some good wine, top shelf, And, I feel like equity is okay now. Well, I'm getting not only, okay, getting the steak and potatoes, but now I have an allergic, I'm allergic to gluten. So now I'm getting gluten-free potatoes or gluten-free bread. And now I feel like I can sit and actually be a part of the conversation, and kind of be a part of the festivities because now my needs are also met. And sitting and having a conversation is that inclusion piece of Now, will I feel like I'm included in the conversation? You see me, understand me, and where I'm coming from, and appreciate my differences. And that belonging piece of it all is now I'm being invited back to the table. Now I'm saying, hey, next week we're going to, dinner at this steakhouse. Want to come? And, you know, and that's honestly what I think about as far as just a really silly, analogy. But when I think about DEI and belonging and accessibility, it's really important to think about it that way. You would never want to be at a table where everybody's eating steak and potatoes, eating, breadcrumbs and butter.
Mhm.
And kind
I
of
like
seeing.
that analogy. I really do. I think another part here is being humble as well. So if it's my dinner party, I'm going to wait and say, like, Christian, are you allergic to anything? Do you have any needs? Is this chair going to work with, accessibility needs you might have? And then the humbleness comes in when what you answer, I might not know about. And
Absolutely.
that's okay. There's so much in the DEIA BJ world. Okay. We're adding in the belonging and the justice for sure. But that you have to be humble in that you might know your own community very well inside and out, but an adjacent community, you might need to ask a lot of questions. You also need to have that EQ to say, I'm going to give this space and really make sure there's time, because what I don't know is the only thing I know is that I don't know things. And that's, the common theme when I'm walking into this world is I know I have a lot of learning to do. I've done a lot of learning, but I'll continuously need to. Let's dive into that EQ element though, because I know that you're an area of interest for you is this kind of lack of EQ in STEM spaces and what effects that has on folks.
Yeah, that's something that's been fairly new for me. And I've noticed just from personal experience and, in my personal life and trying to balance what life is just being a few years post college and this adulting that everyone talks about, and really figuring it out. And I find that it's so interesting looking back at my college experience specifically of how much I had to deal with mentally, being an aerospace student, and just kind of just overall the lack of care. And not to say I don't mean to, demonize anyone or any professors or anything like that. I know they're trying to do their job, and they're the make or break sometimes of if someone decides to stay in the industry or not.
Mhm.
And a lot of times the issue is that there isn't enough time. It's always research, research, getting good grades and, winning grants and all of these things, but we're missing the biggest piece. And that is that EQ of, hey, you know what? I'm seeing that a student that was in the front row raising their hand every question is now either not coming to class, starts off not coming to class on time, then it's not coming to class, not turning in their homework, their grades are starting to slip. In my mind, that's where you start seeing that EQ of kind of reading the room. There's something off with that. And it's not just, this is a bad student, like they're not turning in their homework and fail F, see you next semester kind of thing. It's about seeing it holistically, and I think that that's something that I really appreciated in our engineering success group. And specifically, my personal assigned counselor, the actual name is slipping my mind as far as what they're actually called. So, for lack of better terms, guidance counselor. But nonetheless, she really made a difference because she saw me holistically. She saw Khristian Jones as a person, an aerospace engineer, a friend, a daughter, an intern, and saw all of those things combined to say, okay, Khristian, let's take a second and we're going to put school to the side for just a little bit. And I'm noticing that today you look very, very exhausted. Tell me what's going on. And then all of a sudden the waterworks come, right? And out of that, I get to get an understanding of being seen, but also that helped me be able to do my homework and get guidance and understanding of what's next, because I am a full person. And I think that that kind of transferred over to my, adult job of kind of seeing, you know, just a lack of it, a lack of empathy for each other of, hey, I'm seeing that, you're the head of this project and you're burnt out. And
Yeah.
I know that my work is contingent upon your work, but you're burnt out and you need a break. And I think sometimes there's that kind of that whisper channel slash like these silent expectations of, and everybody feels like, they can't say anything, but secretly everybody's talking behind each other's back that they're burnt out. And I think where it comes down to at the end of it all, and to kind of wrap things up in a pretty bow, it comes down to the fact of simple care for one another and kind of seeing outside of ourselves, and also as an individual being a part of a community that cultivates openness to be able to share, hey, you know what, I'm not feeling like myself today, I'm not having the best day, something, my mom got sick and I have to take care of her, and that's really on my mind, so I'm so sorry, I'm not 100% focusing right now. And having the ability to have those open and honest conversations, especially with leaders, I think that's really important. And I wish I had a solution for you at this moment. That's something I'm working on. But I do see that that's a major issue, especially in leadership in STEM spaces, is just having, because it comes from the top down, of the attitude of, hey, you know what, I care about the next person, I care about what's going on, I care about, you know I'm not necessarily trying to get in your home life, but if home life is affecting work life, it's important to have trust, to be able to share, hey, you know what, I'm not okay, I'm not myself. And that's really, really important in all spaces for sure, but especially in STEM spaces, I feel like, because we're so tasked with the technical all the time, it's almost hard to switch over to, hey, we're not robots, we have feelings.
Well, and you know what, though? It is really efficient to be cutthroat, and it's really efficient to take emotions out of things. And that's why people, I think, they lose that. And the closer they get to the top, the more they think that it's not relevant to getting the job done.
Right.
And as you said, wait a little bit and you're going to burn out. When you're definitely not looking at those around you in a holistic way, you're not going to be looking at yourself in a holistic way. And
Absolutely.
you're going to keep pushing it. You're going to keep just trying to be superhuman, lack of a better, term. And there's no way that anyone can keep that up. And you're going to be unhappy if you do. And I think that's why we see so many folks at the top who are not in a place of, you feel comfortable going to them because you're like, oh, they're not happy. This is not, this is going to be a little bit of a tough conversation because, sometimes people get some reputations, when they're
Absolutely.
when they're lacking that EQ. And so you're not going to go to your boss and say, hey, I've got this family issue, if they're really lacking in that EQ for themselves and for others around them.
Yeah, when you can't tap into empathy for yourself, you really can for others.
Yeah.
And and I 100% agree with you. I think there's some level, and that's a balance that I'm still trying to find. Of, sometimes I feel like I care too much, and I'm like I feel like I care so much, and it doesn't get me far. But I think that it's kind of just your own personal journey, because I think that that's something I've learned to appreciate about myself. That I may not get the job because I'm cutthroat, but I get the job because of honesty and integrity. And it may take me a little longer, but there's trust there and there's respect and understanding, as opposed to someone that got there for slitting throats and everybody's smiling in their face and saying, yep, that person stepped on me to get that promotion, or, that person shook the right hand or rubbed elbows with the right person and, they got this promotion or this raise or this accolade. And so for me, I've kind of gotten to the point where integrity is so important to me that it's even I've haven't had to have the hard choice yet, but I've gotten to the point where I feel like integrity over everything. If it's a raise, money will always come. If it's a promotion, promotions will always come. There's millions of companies out there, if it comes down to it, but your integrity and your reputation follows you. And it's very small. The world is very small. The industry is even smaller. So I learned that growing up. My mom always said, you can't act a fool because somebody knows somebody that knows me. So I always kept that with me, as an adult as well, of just, you never know who knows who. And you never want to have a negative reputation precede you, because that's never good, regardless of where it gets you, in my personal opinion.
Oh, I'd much rather take the long way and feel like I got there in integrity
Absolutely.
than stepping on people, because that's what sometimes is asked of you when you're in that like rat race kind of scenario.
Absolutely.
Let's go back and talk a little bit about burnout, because I'm very passionate about it. I found myself in burnout several times. And of course, when you're in burnout, you don't have the bandwidth to research burnout, right? Because you're
Absolutely.
just one foot in front of another. And when it gets so bad, the thing is that usually, well, for myself, I am so boom, 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 let's do a million things. Let's have a million jobs. Let's go, go, go. Let's make sure you know, if a door is slightly ajar, I'm walking through it. All of these different things that can cause burnout. But then at the end of the day is you've got to really pace yourself and
Absolutely.
take a giant step back. And what I keep seeing with CAP applicants is that they're doing a million one things. So I always ask, like sometimes if we're having last round conversations, you've gotten here, do you have the bandwidth? Like, do you have the bandwidth to go through the Citizen Astronaut program and possibly go to space, and then possibly for a year after join, do your impact program and be a CA for the inevitable future? But, do you have the bandwidth? And sometimes people have to be like, okay, let me get back to you, actually, because I might not. So
Yeah.
how do you think people who are taking on too much, how can they slow down in such a fast-paced industry?
Yeah, that's something that I still struggle with. Like, and that's a constant battle because I've always been someone that was on the go, 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 and
Mm.
constantly doing a lot of things. Cause I think what I used to trick myself into doing is I felt like I'm helping someone, I'm making an impact. So go, 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 go. And not realizing that even if it's not school or it's not my day job, that that's still eating away at the percentage of energy that I have every day when I wake up.
Yeah.
And it's so important to understand that, just because you're in a recovery stage and saying, hey, you know what, I feel like I'm tired. I feel like I have brain fog all the time. I feel like I'm not sleeping. I feel like I'm not eating right. I'm not getting my exercise. And not to be therapeutic, but like it all comes down to filling your cup. And that's so, 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 so important. And I think, sometimes it's coming off as a cliche, but it's very important to do what fills you up so that you have the bandwidth and have the energy to even tackle the basic things.
Mhm.
Like, getting up and eating and taking a shower. And if you have kids and if you're married or, have a partner or your job, like all of these basic necessities on top of trying to save the world all in one day. And so I think the best tip that I've been given and I use and I give other folks is that you really have to notice when you are tapped out. And I think it's an individual type of thing. I don't think anyone can say, this is how you're going to feel and this is how many things, you're going to be tackling. I think it's on an individual basis. But the common thread I've seen is just tiredness. It starts off with just being tired and the brain fog and not feeling like yourself. And then it just piles up. And so I think the best tip that I've ever gotten was sometimes it's bang for your buck, right? And I think especially in college, I used to be a yes woman. I was just like, yes, I'll be on this panel. Yes, I'll lead this organization. Yes, I'll do this. Yes, I'll do that. And my mentor said, Khristian, okay, let's come back real quick and let's go back to the drawing board. What exactly what is your purpose in taking part in these things? And I would say, I'm helping people. I'm helping people. I'm helping people. I feel like I'm making an impact. And she asked me, okay, well, how about just doing this thing? Can't you do that just doing this thing?
Mhm.
And I'm like, no, 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 no. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just really seeing when it comes down to it, when you do have the energy, and sometimes you do, to be able to do 10 different things. But after a while, that 11th thing, that 12th thing, that 13th thing, it becomes too much on top of those basic necessities of life. And so I think that the best advice I ever got was to know your limits, but you have to push the limit to know your limit. And unfortunately, I hate to say that, but that's what taught me was okay, I never want to get like this. And so it allowed me to really take that tip of, okay, well, being a mentor and being a leader of this organization, you're touching all of the areas that you want to touch. So why do you have to be on that panel and keynote speak over there and be leader of this club or this organization? It's okay to do one thing, one big thing that has a big impact as opposed to 15 different small things that are going to equal up to maybe a portion of doing that one thing. It's not quantity, it's definitely quality. And if quantity comes into it and you have the bandwidth, then great, that's awesome. But to keep from burning out, it's important, because sometimes I think there's some burnout that you don't recover from. And I found that that's something that has happened to me recently, and I didn't even realize that I was even capable of that. I pushed myself so hard that it got to the point of not even being tired, but just feeling like no one's listening to what I'm saying. I'm pressing so hard, and I'm pressing and I'm pressing and I'm pressing and I'm trying hard and I'm passionate and I really want this and I think this is great, to the point where it was just like defeated. And being defeated felt like it was just a different type of burnout, because it started to take a toll on my mental health, my emotional health, my physical health after a while. And so that's very, very, very important to know, that sometimes, okay, you can push yourself, but eventually it's going to be that threshold of no return. And you don't want to get to that point, especially when you're doing things out of passion or love for the community, or a project, or, whatever the case may be. That's really, really important. And just for the overall health of yourself, we're seeing more and more and more now adverse effects, of people just feeling like they have to go, 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 go. And now we're in our 30s and feeling like we're 80s. And it's just so not necessary. It's just, you have to slow down a little bit and take care of yourself.
You do have to slow down. You do have to take care of yourself for sure. So outside of, the aerospace industry, what are you doing that fills you with passion and fills your cup?
Yeah, that's a great question. Full transparency, that's something I am continuously working on. I'm in a new transition in life, in my personal life. And so now I realize, I was so used to, like I was saying, being a part of that hustle of just like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, whether it be a personal thing or a professional thing. But then I realized, I was like, man, like, do I have hobbies? Like, I used to feel like, of course I have hobbies. Of course I do. Of course I do. And now I'm like, okay, maybe I don't have hobbies. And I'm discovering those things that I love, and, getting to one thing that I know for myself. I'm like crazy fan of Disney, and Disney makes me happy. When I'm sad, I watch Disney movies. But I've been finding that I just love being social and getting to have those interpersonal connections with folks and my friends and family, and getting to really tap back into that. and fostering those relationships is so important to me. So I mean, it's not a hobby, but it really does fill my cup getting to go have a glass of wine with my friends, or getting to go to breakfast with my mom, or having people over, watching movies or things like that. That's something that really does fill my cup and is so important to me. As a, career woman now, I can call myself, woo. I think that it's so important is the work life balance is so important, and it's not just your job. I always felt like work life balance is just your job and your rest of your life, and work life balance is everything that's work. So that's including my nonprofit organization. That's including helping people for work outside of work hours, whether it be philanthropy or anything philanthropic. That's all considered work. Life is the personal things that have nothing to do with work. And that's really important. And I never realized that just a year or so ago of that balance of understanding that, like, yes, work seems fun. Like the extracurricular work seems fun until it becomes work. And then you realize, okay, well, I'm missing a piece of what makes Christian happy, or what makes me happy, fill in the person, outside of, helping other people, if that makes sense. And not to sound selfish, but as a person that helps people a lot, and I put people before myself quite a bit, it's imperative that I stop every now and again and say, hey, what is it that I need, so that I can continue to be that, bring my full self, to work and to my personal life and in my relationships. That's so very, very important, because that's what makes the person, the great people that we are. And if we're not our full self, we can't, grace the world with our presence.
100%, 100%. That nonprofit humanitarian burnout is massive. People like yourself who are creating big splashes and big impact, you've got to make sure that you're filling your cup. Watching the Disney movies. I got to ask, what's your favorite Disney movie?
Oh, that's so hard. I actually think I have a new favorite, and I'm really surprised. I would have to say, okay, so overall, overarching, nothing is gonna compare to The Princess and the Frog. That's just my like favorite movie. I know all the lines. I know pretty much all the lines of all the movies, but that one can't compare. But I just watched Zootopia and Elemental, and I think those two, I would have to say Zootopia is like my new favorite. I'm surprised it took me this long to watch it. But when it came out, I think I was just so busy. I was like, that's so cute. Okay, I'll get to it. And I just never did. But I think it speaks to my DEI passion a little bit too. I'm like, oh, I see that. And that's a thing. And that's a symbol. And that's an analogy for something.
Yeah, and I love it. Embedding these understandings into cartoons, it's so much more poignant than, we were getting Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast, and you're getting some, she falls in love with her captor. Like, come on. I don't think
Yeah.
that, this next generation, I think we're a lot more tuned into what we need our kids to learn and understand. I have a little baby, and I'm already thinking about what he's going to be watching and how much screen time and this and that. And of course, he's 4 months old. So we're thinking ahead. We're thinking ahead, but we're already like, okay, we want to pre-screen the movies that he watches. And I don't know that I want maybe some of those classic tropes to be something that's normalized, but this new, inside out movies and movies that really speak to that EQ, going back to it, like that is great. And I'm so glad that they're infusing these stories.
Absolutely. I really love it. And I think even too, and I have to give grace for, Cinderella and Snow White for sure, and Beauty and the Beast, because times were different. It wasn't as socially acceptable, for women to say, okay, yeah, I want to be, married and loved and all of those things, but I also know that I bring something to the table. And so that's why I think, I have to give grace to them because, that was a parallel to what was going on in society. But I do love now the awareness of we're more than just characters in a story, like there's a deeper meaning to us as people. And I think it's really mirroring society, and how we're continuing to grow. I love Inside Out. I love Turning Red. That was another great one that there was a little bit of controversy around it. But I mean, it was very real, talking about puberty and, what it means to be a woman and to grow into a woman and, being a teenager or a preteen and, all of those things are very, very relevant. Like no one wants to talk about it out loud, but it's very, very, very relevant. And it's so important to talk about it. And I thought it was great to see in a Pixar film, hey, you're not the only one. We walk around thinking we're the only one. And then you're like, hey, so do you feel like this? And then you don't feel so alone. Someone's like, oh, yeah, I feel like that before.
It's back to the belonging, right?
Absolutely. That is so, so, so very important. And I think and one thing I do want to mention, and I apologize for tangenting in advance, but it's so interesting and specifically as women too, in what I've been seeing lately with DEI. And it kind of goes hand in hand, of course, with the aerospace industry, but also kind of like that, again, that work-life balance of, okay, well, I really want to be a family woman. I really want to be married. I really want to have kids. I want to raise my family. Like that's something that I really aspire to do. But I also see women in front of me that have struggled, and just, it just causes a lot of friction or like turbulence in their relationships and family relationships because they're trying to balance this nurturer role as well as being what I like to call a big boss in the industry where we would usually see males being CEOs or COs and C-suites in general, and so I think we have to really be cognizant too of that as well, as we continue to grow in this DEI space, especially from the inclusion piece of things. Because I must say I get quite annoyed, for lack of better terms, when I hear with women, oh, how do you balance being a mom and going to work? And you're like, well, I mean, my husband's a dad, and has children too, and he has a job, So it's kind of like that feeling of, well, why do I get that question? You
Why
don't
do you
usually
get the question? Why do you have the bias? And then for me, when I became a mom, it was this kind of like, do I hide it? Because
absolutely
it's true. I'm not showing up in the same way. I'm showing
right.
up in a million ways. I'm not, I got to work sometimes at 4 a.m. I got to come in a little bit late. I got to, flex my day. I'm here, but I'm not able to be in the same way as before. And it's I had to question, like, do I hide that or am I honest? Because that's what a lot of folks in my position with kids, young kids, are having to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it just comes down to, again, you have to create that inclusive environment of being able to truly bring your full self, to work. And sometimes you have, especially for moms, and this kind of goes back to just nature. Like we can't help like moms naturally, they literally feed babies. So we can't really change that piece. But and that equity and inclusion piece of, okay, well, I guess I am in this space, but I also need to make sure that when I'm gone, my baby has food, So it's kind of like that space of that doesn't make us not equipped to do the job or to, to not do it as well. It's just there are certain, things that we need. Again, coming back to the needs of, hey, I need 15, I'll be right back. If you know what I mean? Like, kind of thing. And that's so very important. And I think that's something that we really need to continue to grow with in the industry, and also with dads too. I've seen too many, guys that are like, hey, my wife just had a baby and I'm off for a week. Okay, and now I'm back on, I'm right on. And you're like, you're literally about to bring a baby into this world and you're emailing me like, what's going on here? And so, having that balance of like, it's also okay for dads to be like, hey, on the other hand, you know, I need to be away from work to be able to bond with a child, like that's really important. Dads are very important too, and kind of taking away the pressure, that society puts on males as well, of like, well, they'll be okay, like come back to work. It's like, no, like, yes, I understand there's that need on both ends, but dads need to bond with their children too. So that's really important, and kind of eliminating that kind of stereotype, of, oh, well, the baby just pops out and okay, back to work.
Hand them off to the nanny and back you go. Well, there's an interesting statistic that I recently dug up, that 28% of women right now make up the STEM workforce. I was shocked. 28 is so low. I mean, and in the UK, we're looking at 18%. Now, I want to go back and check that, and I'll put it into captions because that feels like it's too low.
Yeah.
Now, why do you think we have so few women in STEM?
That's a really, I think, multifaceted question. But I think the main reason, we're doing better, I want to say that, as far as the industry, but there's still a very, very long way to go. And I think that what we just talked about is also a really big thing of like, okay, well, now I have to choose between being, and I'm going to say an engineer for, just the purposes of I'm an engineer. So if, for example, I'm an engineer, but I also want to start a family and I want to be able to, be there for them. But now I feel like I have to choose, because if I do that, then I'm not going to get the promotion, or, I'm not going to get as high. I'm going to come off as emotional, or whatever the case may be. And so you have these stereotypes or biases about women in general, but it really does make a difference when you're in a male dominated industry, because it's highlighted even more. And so there's that lack of inclusion still. I think that there's this idea of like feeling like you have to be down with the boys, for lack of better terms. Like it's really hard to be yourself. And I think that's a piece of it, where it's kind of like you just get tired. You just get tired of either being phony, faking the funk, or getting to the other end of the spectrum of, well, now I've been going against the grain and trying to be myself so long, I'm burnt out and I can't do it anymore. And I think that's so, so, so sad, because there's so much talent out there and there's so much diversity and thought that's brought in. And I hate to be like us versus them, or anything like that, but each gender bring, and then I'm speaking in a binary world at this point. I'm very aware that in a non-binary world in general, but specifically in a binary, I kind of thought we both bring certain things to the table, and certain thoughts and certain perspectives of the world that really make a difference. And I mean, we're just wired. It's just, I truly believe that that's just how it is, regardless of how you slice it and dice it. But it's so important, to bring those different perspectives and diversity of thought. And then you add non-binary, about non-binary system in there. And that's even more of a layer, a different perspective and a different, way of thinking that's so very important to have at the table. So I don't know. I think like I said earlier, I really wish I had a solution to it and not just complaints, but I definitely think that
It's multi-layered. I mean, I asked you that, and then I was like, that's the hardest, that's a whole another hour, that question.
Definitely. Yeah. There's so many layers to it of just, feeling included and, just not feeling like you have to, like I said, either fake the funk or you have to get tired of going against the grain, because I don't know how many times I've had situations of my male counterparts, or specifically, I think sometimes it's hard for me as a Black female because I have the double whammy of, okay, now I'm in a double minority. And so you have that situation of like not thinking that I have intellect and, questioning that, but then also thinking I'm dingy because I have pink nails, like it's just kind of, just because I have pink nails does not mean I can't turn a wrench. That does not mean I don't get dirty on the shop floor. Yes, I may be wearing pink steel-toed shoes, but that does not mean that I am any less incapable. Um, just makes me different.
I mean, to celebrate the differences. Before we started the show, I asked if you had the bandwidth to discuss this microaggression that happened at work. If you don't mind, and you said that you were okay to share it. I think it's so important because these conversations, these stories that happen, there's so many people who are experiencing it and they don't know that they're not alone, because these small comments are usually so offhanded and so to the side, and so I wanted to amplify this so that people know when things like this happen, when if you are an individual, double whammy, a woman of color, these side comments sometimes happen. So if you don't mind sharing what your coworker said.
Yeah. So to keep transparency there without outing anyone. I was at my job, and I have a coworker that is also a woman of color. She's an engineer as well. Very smart. I mean, like, takes command of the room. Really, I admire her so much. And I had a colleague of mine, mix us up in the way of, okay, well, there's no way, like we look nothing alike. And I think there's this stereotype, and I'm just very blunt and transparent, that all Black people look alike. We don't. And I think it's something where it's hard because you don't feel seen, because we both feel like we're individuals, we're on two different teams, we have different style, we oh my gosh, like has become an amazing friend of mine, but we're very different. Even though we're the same, we're very different. And so I think it was just one of those things that felt like, okay, well, you don't even try to see me, because and then when you point it out, it's like, well, why? I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, I just called you so and so. And it's like, well, that's not my name, and even if you do have a situation where the shoe is on the other foot, and, okay, well, if your name is, Peter, and I call you Doug, and that's somebody else, like, you wouldn't be, oh, well, you have the same hairstyle. That's not a good excuse. Like, it's not, it's like, okay. And then multiple times is where it starts to get where it's like, okay, now you literally just don't care about my identity at all. And don't try.
That's exactly it.
You know,
It's you don't care about my identity. You don't care to get to know me. You're putting both of us into a box, and that's what I'm
absolutely.
hearing. And how on earth can someone respect you when they don't even see you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so very important, to feel seen. Like, again, that's where belonging happens. And I think I'm so glad that it's a lot less socially acceptable to say, like, I don't see color, because that, I feel like that's completely just tone deaf. In a way of like, yeah, you do see color, but again, it's about that understanding that, okay, even though you're different, I'm going to respect you, and I'm going to treat you how I want to be treated, and treat you equitably. And I think a way better, way of the underlying understanding of everybody's the same. I'm going to treat everybody the same, yes, but identities are very important, and what makes us different and unique is important. Like, I love pink, and I could live my life in pink. And my coworker was like, Christian, okay, I know we love pink, but that's a little excessive. And I'm like, but it's not. And, that's just what makes me Khristian Jones. And it's very important to me. And so, that's also something too. And I want to bring up a story, and I apologize for, again, going on a tangent, but to add to that, gender, there's still issues with gender, and specifically in maintenance a lot, in the military as well. I've heard this with women. And my coworker and I were going to support a particular project, and the technicians specifically, we were getting introduced, and these are the engineers that are going to be supporting this project. And one of the leadership, the people in leadership, had said, oh well, I mean, I didn't realize there were engineers because I wasn't looking for girls. First of all, I'm a woman. There's nothing girl about me. And, that's just a lack of respect of, okay, well, not to generalize, but I'm wearing an Apple Watch, I'm wearing a polo, and I'm wearing khakis, and you can't tell me I don't look like an engineer, sir. Like, that is my mom loves to call it the engineer uniform. She's like, you guys all look the same with the uniform, and it's hilarious. And then I'm like, no, mama, I guess we do. But yeah, it was just, again, you don't see me for who I am and what I bring to the table, and the fact that it's not even perceivable for you to think that I would be an engineer. Like, I see if it's one thing, if it's like, I just didn't know you were new to the base or whatever, that's one thing. But to say completely, like, I wasn't looking for girls specifically, that was kind of a punch to the gut.
And how don't you hear that in your head before it comes out? Even if you have that bias, like, you really don't care if that's coming out of your mouth.
Exactly. And I mean, it's like, even if you're thinking it, that's pretty bad, but especially in this day and age, and, to also be responsible for it, it's kind of where you're in a place of, you have to dig deep and not allow yourself to, stoop low, because part of me wanted to be like, oh, so I can't do engineering work. Sounds good. Well, your issues aren't getting taken care of. Who's next? Like, but you can't do that, But it's that lack of understanding, and I think too, just, again, it's a culture of, when you don't have to represent certain groups, it's very hard. I think there's specifically one female in that leadership, and it's a pretty hefty, space, male dominated space, and she speaks of it a lot, but she does a great job. The guys that respect her, and but it took time, for sure. But that's something that's really important to be cognizant of, that even that type of language or type of talk is even tolerated, in those spaces of any type of microaggression or any outward aggression, and just being completely, overt with it. Sometimes I've had that as well, like, oh well, I didn't think Black girls could be engineers, and it's like, well, here I am
Yeah.
with my degree as a rocket scientist.
Can't wait till they dig this up in the archives, hopefully not too distant into the future. And they'll be like, wow, it was like that, because there's no way but up from here. Now, when it comes to someone who's entering, though, now in this current space, is there advice you have for a woman of color who's getting into the aerospace industry?
Yeah, so I would say resilience is key. I think that's really important. And understanding that it, I know you feel, I'm sure, because I know I feel it all the time, of this weight of like, I can't mess up, because if I mess up, then that's going to make people feel like every Black woman coming behind me is going to mess up, or is not going to be good enough, and I'm going to screw this up for everybody. And understanding that that also plays a part into the equity piece of, my counterparts don't have to worry about the end of their species, because if they make a mistake, that's so important to really, as much as possible, to have that positive self-talk of, it's okay to mess up. And just because you make a mistake doesn't mean that you're going to be the downfall of, DEI in your company. Like, that's not the case. It's very, of course, perform and do well, and be authentic to who you are. But don't put the unnecessary external a feeling of external pressure of, I can't mess up, because you can, and you're human. I think that's so important, along with resilience of just the basic, like, you're gonna get no, you're gonna get, hey, maybe next time. But it's good to just keep pushing and continue to be who you are, and continue to work hard and have grit. But I hope and pray that moving forward we don't have these inequities, because a lot of that piece is the inequity in itself of, well, I'm working twice as hard just to get to be on the level as my peers, even though I'm really outperforming, but yet I keep getting second place. And that's the part where I my heart breaks for myself and for other, Black women and women of color specifically in our industry is, well, you can work and work and work and work and work and work and work. And sometimes it's like, time for the promotion, or time for the raise, or time for the accolade, and you get no. And the hard part is, you can have all the motivational speeches you want, and it's really hard to, in a hard pill to swallow, when you're like, I did everything right. I did what I could. I overachieved. I put in the work, and I still got nothing from it. And so I think that's something that's so important, again, to go back to resilience of like, the right time will come, the right opportunity will come. And regardless of the accolade, whether it be, in pay, or in awards, or promotion, or things like that, someone's going to see it. And it's important to advocate for yourself. That is so very important. And it's easy, especially as women, but especially as African American women, to feel like we're asking for too much, because we've been told that so much. Well, oh my gosh, well, you're asking for too much. No, because Bob over there, this is the basic. This was just his offer, his initial offer letter. And you're saying I'm asking for too much? And pushing back on those stereotypes and those norms, those societal norms of, no, I'm not asking for too much. I'm asking for what I'm worth. So pay me what I'm worth. Treat me how valuable I am. And if that's all taken care of, we don't have a problem. And so it's very important to advocate for yourself. And that's for any woman, anyone for sure. And specifically for women and women of color, advocating for yourself is so very important. And don't allow the pushback of, or the fear of being the angry Black woman, or the spicy Latina, or whatever the case may be, whatever negative stereotype is out there. Don't allow that to hinder you from advocating for yourself, because you are worthy, you are enough, you are valuable, and you should be treated as such. And so you got to start first with you, though, because if you don't advocate for yourself, who is? Very few people are going to say, hey, you know what, Khristian, maybe you should ask for this. No, they're going to say, oh, well, you took this, you asked for this, here you go. That was a cheap date. Keep it going.
Yeah, you got to remember Bob. Bob with the boat shoes. Is he asking for, more? Absolutely. So
Exactly. With less merit too. Sometimes it's like, well, I feel like, and I'm like, no, no. Like, no, not this time, sir.
You've got to advocate for yourself because you got to think about as much as it's awkward sometimes, it's hard, it's going to take some maybe talking to yourself in the mirror, right?
Mhm.
Because these hard conversations where there's friction possibly, it's not easy, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes for you and the next person. This conversation might not have to happen. So, it's worth it. It's worth coming up against and having that advocacy for yourself.
Advocacy is key. Advocacy and resilience is definitely key um, in this industry for
Those,
sure.
those are great pointers. And, I think that you've done so much in terms of this fellowship to be instilling that into the next generation. So thank you.
Absolutely. It really was I go back to passion, and it really was just I felt a call to action, and the passion was there, the frustration was there, the drive, the this needs to change. um and so it really is a blessing to my life, and it's great. Don't get me wrong, like I'm so happy, to be in this position. However, the greatest achievement is seeing my students and our students achieve something greater and continue to grow and start to believe in themselves. And so it's the pleasure really is all mine, getting to be a part of their journey. And I just feel so humbled to be even welcomed into their lives, to watch them, have a sideline view of their Super Bowl championship ring.
Cheering on in the sidelines. Well, it's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. So I really appreciate you taking the time and imparting your wisdom with us.
I'm so happy I got a chance to speak with you and get to share a little bit about my experience and some students' experiences, and kind of shine some light on what it is kind of going on in the industry and where we can grow. And so I'm so appreciative for you inviting me to speak with you, and getting to dig a little deeper into this topic. It's so important and much needed. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And we'll have in the comment section where they can find you, find out more information and dates of submission for the fellowship as well.
Absolutely. And keep following us.
Yes, great. All right. Well, thank you so much. This is the end of our latest episode. Thank you for listening to the Universal Inclusion Podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how to get involved in the space industry, follow us on Instagram and TikTok at universal_inclusion. Our passion is amplifying voices in STEAM and STEM and the space industry. If you'd like to be a guest, shoot us a DM. Until next time, ad Astra.